Okay, welcome to the Sports Cafe. We've got a really good guest coming up. I'd just like to thank InsureWise, which you can see the backdrop behind me, have sponsored that for us. So it looks really amazing. So I appreciate that. All the guys, Neil and the team from InsureWise. So I'd like to welcome our guest for today, who is Ben Pugh from actually the Cayman Islands national manager. So Ben, how are you?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks, Neil. How are you?
Yeah, really good. I appreciate you coming on and spending a little bit of time to go through your journey as a coach from sleepy Suffolk through to the national stage. So how did it all come about, really, Ben? To let the listeners know.
Yeah. So I was working at Ipswich. I worked there for 8 years in a variety of roles. And kind of towards, I was working with the youth development phase, leading that phase. And then I saw an opportunity come up to work in the Cayman Islands, actually, for a club here. The role was to oversee effectively a grassroots club, but like a really quite well-run grassroots club. And I thought, the job maybe wasn't as good as the job I had at Ipswich, but I thought it would be a great life experience. And, even if it doesn't work out, at least I've done something different. And so I came across, and quite quickly I got on board working with the Cayman Islands Football Association. They were in a bit of a transition phase, and so I helped write their philosophies and their curriculum, their way of playing, as well as helping coach. So I worked with, I assisted the senior team, which was great for me. And we played in the Nations League against Montserrat at home, which was a really great experience. And then shortly after that, I started working with the U23s, and we had Olympic qualifiers. And at the same time, I took over as the senior team head coach as well. So it happened quite quickly after being here, and it's been really good so far.
No, it sounds an amazing journey already. And how many years have you been there so far?
Yeah, so I've been in the Cayman Islands for about 2.5 years, and I've been the head coach for just under 2 years now. So it's been it's gone very quickly, and unfortunately, due to the current pandemic, we've not had a game in a little while. But we've got games coming up in March. First game's in 29 days, so looking forward to that, and trying to finalise the logistics. It's obviously travelling at the moment is obviously very complex, but we're really looking forward to that.
Brilliant. So let's flip back to the start. You said you were with Ipswich for 8 years. So how did you get into football coaching? You obviously played locally, and then you got to a stage where you decided to do coaching, or you fell into that role, or?
Yeah, so I think like most young boys, I loved football. I played football throughout my childhood, and I'm from a small village called Shotley, which is just outside of Ipswich. I played, played all through the youth there, and for a few teams in Ipswich, and but kind of when I actually went to West Suffolk College and did the BTEC, sports BTEC there, and when I was there, I kind of realised that I was never going to really be good enough to have a prolonged career in the game, earning enough money that I could do it full time. And I thought my idea was I loved it. I wanted to be at the top end of the game, and I felt that going into coaching would potentially give me that further down the line. So I might not be able to play at the highest level, but I may be able to coach at the highest level. So whilst I was there, I took my level 1 and then did my level 2. And then, started volunteering, and actually did a sports science internship at Ipswich Town. I was doing a degree at the University of Suffolk, a sports science degree. So I volunteered there, and at the same time, I also did a voluntary role of working with the pre-academy, so the under 7s and under 8s. And I'm a great believer in you have to give your time, and you have to kind of work harder than everybody else. I didn't have this extensive playing background that some ex-pros have, meaning they can go automatically into good roles because of their knowledge and experience. So I volunteered, and from then on, I made sure I kind of said yes to everything, in the sense that if the academy ever needed a coach because a coach was away or sick or whatever it be, I would always say yes. Even if I had plans, I would move those, and I'd make myself available so I could travel. I remember the first game I did was with the under-9s, and it was away at Arsenal, and I think within like 3-4 minutes it was about 4-5-0 down, and I was thinking, okay, maybe I'm not as good a coach as I thought I was. Yeah, and it kind of snowballed from there. And as I said, I went from voluntary to then part-time, working with the foundation phase with various age groups, and then full-time assisting the youth development phase, and then leading the youth development phase, so the 12 to 16s before, like I said, coming out here. So yeah, it was a good journey, and I learned a lot from people at Ipswich, both ex-players and people that had coached there a long time, and kind of tried to build up my knowledge base, and yeah, that got me to an opportunity where I could come overseas and give something back. And like I said, it's been a really good experience throughout.
Sure. So have you brought anything that you learned from Ipswich? So sort of the development, you're talking about the development side. Have you brought any of that into the Cayman Islands sort of development program itself?
Yeah, so a few bits really. So firstly, our senior team is actually very young. It's actually almost like a U23 team. We've actually got some players that are 16 and 17 who train regularly with us. We're quite lucky in the sense that because most of our players are island based, we can train weekly. So we usually train twice a week, or in the build up to these games. As of next week, we'll increase the training numbers. We still have a few players in England and the US, and one in Romania, but that's something that is an advantage. And so I see myself certainly as a developer there. Yes, at the top end, it's about getting results, but for me, it's still about developing players, and more so developing people, young people as well. And alongside that, I also lead the coach education program at the Cayman Islands Football Association. So we have a coaches association where we've got over 100 coaches, and we do webinars, we do field-based sessions, we do classroom-based sessions. So trying to upskill coaches here with their knowledge, and then also putting on coaching qualifications as well. So we've recently done 3 CONCACAF D licenses back to back. So we've got 59 new qualified coaches, and that's something that will continue this year. So yeah, there's been a lot that I learned at Ipswich in terms of, and on the courses, in terms of how to develop people, how to develop players, individual players, how to improve the culture of and the environment. So I'd certainly like to think I've picked up a lot there and brought it to the Cayman Islands.
So is football, not knowing Cayman Islands that much, is football the main sport in the Cayman Islands?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So there's other sports are big as well, but football is the biggest. For our last games, I think we had about 2,500 fans for the games, which was great. Unfortunately, our next games won't be here because of travel restrictions. There's a 14-day quarantine here for anybody on arrival, so that makes it impossible for the games. But yeah, cricket's big as well, big in the Caribbean, and there's lots of other sports here, the same as anywhere that people follow, but football's certainly very well supported, and even the local league, which is an amateur league, gets good numbers every weekend. And for a small island, or for a small set of islands that has on average about 64,000 people, we have quite a few senior men's and women's teams, so as well as youth teams. So it's a very good footballing place to be.
No, brilliant. You touched on that. There's the majority of your base of players are from the island, but you did mention there was a few from the different countries, USA and one in England, you said as well. So is that are they players that you've managed to get the pathways through to play into different leagues, or is that something that was in place before you were put in charge, Ben?
Yeah, it was something that was already here. Okay. We've got quite a few players that do play overseas. Like I said, England is the easiest option because it's easy to get a British passport from here, being a British territory. But it's something that we still try and do more. We've had a few players go on trial at USL clubs in the US, and going what you're saying about developing people. We're big here on trying to get players scholarships through football. we recognise that being a small place, the number of players that will go on and play professionally is very small. But if we can get them an opportunity to better their education off the back of or through football, then hopefully they can come back and they can share that experience, not only from a football setting, but also come back and improve the community with the degree or the education that they've now got.
So you mentioned about it's the Premier League, isn't it? The Cayman Island Premier League.
Yeah, correct.
So how many teams compete in that league?
Yeah, so there's two divisions. You've got the Cayman Premier League has 10 teams, and then the first division has 11 teams. And again, talking about development, there's I think 6 teams in there that are B teams of clubs from the Premier League, and they're predominantly kind of under 18 teams. So we recognised there wasn't enough games here for the younger age groups. So we this year we added that first division, which meant all of a sudden these under 18s are now in the senior league. They're getting 20 games plus the under 18s league, where they'll maybe get another 15, 16 games. All of a sudden they're playing more games, and it will help the national team further down the line, but it'll also help these kids' development with whether they go overseas or with scholarship opportunities. So men's football's really good here. The women's league, we've got 5 teams in the league at the moment. Next year we'll have a minimum of 6. There's one more team that wants to add, and last year we only had 3. So we're increasing slowly, and there's a big focus on improving women's football here as well. So the leagues are healthy. They could be better, but we're certainly going in the right direction.
No, that's excellent. So you mentioned the 17s and 20, and then the 23s that you have. Is that something that you oversee as well, or is there individual managers for those teams?
Yeah, so the U23s is connected to the senior team, just because, as I said, our senior team is so young. Most of those players can do both. Yeah. And then we have a U17s and a U15s. This is on the male side of the game, with another coach who leads that. But we're a small team, so it's myself, the technical director, and another coach. So we kind of oversee everything on both sides of the game. And then with the women's side of the game, there's the senior women's team, which is newly formed here. There hasn't been a national women's team for a long time. They were supposed to play games last year, but unfortunately that was, of course, put on hold. And then again, they have a 17s and a 15s as well. So we have, again, because the size of the island, we try, and there's a small pool of players is of course a disadvantage, but the advantage is that we see these players all the time and we can train regularly. So every age group will train kind of twice a week. More so when there's tournaments coming up, but it's a good place to kind of gauge the development of players, because we do see them so often, and because we also manage the senior and youth leagues. It's a good opportunity to watch as many games of football and keep an eye on all of these players. It's unlikely that there's any player here that we don't know of that would be kind of good enough or eligible to play for the national teams. Yeah,
sure. So I've got a question, because what we do for most guests, we put on Twitter. I don't know if you did see, asking for questions. We get random questions, but there's one that just links to that, which was let me just click onto it, but it was to do with that. So basically saying, have you searched for players from England to see if they're eligible really to play for the Cayman Islands? Is that something that you guys look to do to try and obviously upskill the team?
Yeah, we've spoken about it. It's very difficult to kind of manage that, because like I said, we know maybe because of COVID, we've had a few of them come back. We've probably got 5 or 6 players in England or in the UK that play at a reasonable level. Same as I said in the US and other places, but trying to actually, find those players that maybe we don't know about is a very difficult task. We've had a couple of talks with the English FA, but again, it's not so easy. I also had a couple of players actually from the US actually reach out to us and say one of their parents or grandparents is Caymanian. So that's something we probably need to do a little bit better. But how we do that is a challenge. I
guess it's a resource as well, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it definitely is, and it's, you know, as we know, this is a small place, so it's not. Is it feasible to go and scout games? Maybe not, but if we can build a better network where we, you know, and we speak to the players we know, and we ask if they know any other players that are in England that have that connection, but at the minute it's been largely unsuccessful. So hopefully maybe down the line, maybe somebody watches this and they can get in contact. I don't know. But, you know, hopefully further down the line we can have that better network of and maybe find one or two hidden gems that will add something to the program.
No, definitely. So we'll carry on with the guest questions. So
sure.
Are any of your players full-time professionals?
So we have one who's in Romania. I think he might be moving to potentially a club in Portugal, but he's kind of the only one. And we've got a couple that, like I said, play kind of semi-professional in England. But it's a challenge we face. So in the last set of games, for example, we played Barbados, who had 7 or 8 professionals in their team, and we had a team full at that time of no professionals. Personally, I think some of our players are good enough to play at a higher level, whether that's professional, whether that's semi-professional, and maybe they haven't had the opportunity due to maybe not knowing how to get off island, or there not being the footage to see them. And it's something we are trying to address. Like I said, it's difficult at the moment due to travel restrictions, but there are certainly players that are good enough and should be playing at a higher level, and that is our main focus. Is, as I said, you know, yes, we want the national team to do well, but we also want to give these players an opportunity to play at the highest level and kind of see what they can do. And you know, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but at least they've had the opportunity to do that. And we have quite good connections with a few of the USL clubs and clubs in the NISA League. That we had 2 players, as I said, go on trial with Loudoun United last year. And again, they'd be willing to have a couple more. And Detroit City also willing to have a couple of players, but it's just finding it's just making sure it's possible to get them there and get them back. And, you know, these players have full-time jobs, so it's not as easy as just saying, I'm going to take 2 weeks off to go for a trial and then come back and then quarantine for 2 weeks. Employers aren't too keen on that. And that's even something that's a challenge for us even going into these games, is because we have to quarantine on return. We're asking for employers for 3, nearly 4 weeks off work. And we're still waiting to hear back from a through, but it's certainly a challenge. But yeah, to go back to the question, we only have 1 at the moment, but hopefully in the near future, we should have a few more.
That's good. And obviously, you know, development wise, you know, if you can get those players into the links and the networks that you've got, then I'm sure going forward, there'll be plenty more coming through, and obviously benefit the national team. So touching on the national team, what are the ambitions from you as the head coach, manager, for the coming campaign, really?
Yeah, sure. So previously we played in the Nations League, and we were 206, rated 206 in the FIFA World Rankings, and nobody kind of gave us a hope. We played Barbados, US Virgin Islands, and St. Martin, who were all well above us in the FIFA World Rankings, and we ended up doing really well. We won 4 of our 6 games. And we narrowly missed out on qualification on goal difference to Barbados, who were very good sides. As I said, they've got 7 or 8 professional players. They're a good standard. Every one of them was like 6'2", 6'3", and you know they're a really good team, and they were better than us, definitely. We're now going into World Cup qualifiers, which we're in a group with Suriname, Canada, Bermuda and Aruba. So again, even more so, a really tough group. We all know the qualities that Canada have, the players they have, and Suriname are again very, very strong. And they've actually got about 15 or 16 new players from overseas as well. A guy who plays at Galatasaray, Crystal Palace, like a number of Dutch clubs. So they'll be very, very strong. Bermuda have kind of outperformed a lot of teams in recent years as well. So again, a very tough game, and Aruba will be tough as well. I think there's no easy games in this group. But are we going to qualify for a World Cup? Extremely unlikely. But the goal with it is the next process. So after these round of World Cup qualifiers, we go back into the Nations League. And if you win your Nations League group, you go into 2 qualifiers. And if you win those, you qualify for the Gold Cup. So the Gold Cup is the Caribbean version of the Euros, effectively. So our goal would be to qualify for that. Is it difficult? Yes, it'll be extremely difficult, but is it impossible? Certainly not. So it's something, as I said, we're building towards. As I said, we've got a very young team at the moment, and that's going to be in a year, 2 years time. So if we continue to build and improve, then you know, football's the beauty of football is if you do things properly and you get a little bit of luck, you never know. So that's the goal. That's the long-term goal. Can we qualify for a Gold Cup? And yeah, that's what all our efforts are focused towards.
So the Cayman Islands never qualify for any of those mentioned competitions?
No, not as of yet. And actually, furthermore, never won a World Cup qualifier either. So going into these set of 4 games, the goal is, can we win one of those games? Yes, it's a development process. We'll focus on how we play. We focus on the bigger picture, but that's still, and making a little bit of history is still something that certainly for the players they're looking to do. Like I said, to qualify for a major tournament would be an amazing achievement. But if we can start breaking down these little barriers and making little bits of history, then it fills a team of confidence, and it gets everybody on board, and yeah, hopefully one day we can qualify for a major tournament. Would be an outstanding achievement for an island that's, as I said, or a set of islands that has around 64,000 people.
And it's small steps, isn't it? You win one qualifier, and then you get the momentum, and potentially you get a couple more. Like you said, in the last campaign, nobody expected you to win any games, and you went and won 4 out of 6. So that's an amazing achievement for the size of the the nation. So questions. Currently, I've gone through a few of them. The COVID, obviously, we've touched on the COVID scenario. We're obviously having to ask all our guests about the COVID scenario. So what is the biggest sort of barriers that the COVID has set yourself as the national manager?
Yeah, so we're quite lucky here because we're COVID free. So we have been for about, I don't know, I guess about 8 or 9 months now. So football's been running kind of as of normal. I think it was from about July, August last year. So from that side of things, it's not affect local football. And we're lucky that our players are playing every week. But obviously from an international scale, we were supposed to play these World Cup qualifiers in September and October, and then they got moved to October and November, and then they've been moved again to now March and June. So COVID certainly put that on hold, and it's meant that our last competitive game was over a year ago, nearly a year and a half ago. So that comes with its own problems, but everybody's in a similar boat. So we certainly can't use that as an excuse or as a reason to not be ready when the games come about. But of course, it's been a challenge, and we want to play more games. From a personal level, the games are the biggest excitement, and the players would of course say the same thing. Being in an industry where results-based industry, and especially doing so well in those Nation League games, we want to get these games going as soon as possible. But I think we're slowly seeing improvements, and as I said, if these games do go ahead in March, which we certainly hope they do, it will be a step forward, and hopefully we can make show a good account of ourselves.
Will you have the players that are based outside the island available for those set of fixtures?
We hope so. We don't know for definite yet, because again, it depends largely on quarantine when they return and their job places. So that's something we're currently in discussion with, and once kind of plans are finalised, we'll know for definite whether those players can travel. But we certainly hope so. They're good players. That's why they're playing overseas. And if the games are in the US, which it looks like, then hopefully the US-based players, it will be easier for them. But it's maybe just the Europe-based players which may be a little bit more challenging.
Sure. So with the national program, going back to the coaching side of it, when do you start introducing players into your international sort of program? So you mentioned under 15s. Is that the youngest that you work with, or do you work with younger age groups?
Yeah. So the program starts at U15, but it kind of works every 2 years. So in the 15s, it's U15s and U14s, and I think being a small place, you know who the good players are. So if you've got a good player who's U13 or even U12 that needs that greater challenge, then of course we'd include them in the program. And the girls almost run a U13s as well, so they're even younger players. We're lucky that a lot of clubs on Ireland have really good programs which they train with. So we keep an eye on that. We'll sometimes observe training and we'll certainly observe games, but it's just recognizing what's right for the individual. So as I said, we have a player who's just turned 16 who's been training with us now for 3 or 4 months because he's good enough and because he needs that additional challenge for his development. So it's just recognizing the individual and when they're ready to come into the program and at what level they need to play. Like I said, we've got quite a few U17s who train with the senior national team, and with games in March, that's the priority at the moment. So they train regularly with us, and whether they will be involved or not is to be decided, but certainly they'll be better off for the experience of training regularly, and if they do play in the games or be involved in the program, then or the match day squad, it will certainly be an excellent experience for them.
Yeah, definitely. The under 17s and the 23s, do they have competitions coming up like yourself in the near future,
Yeah.
or is it something that's been put on the back burner?
Yeah, so it's lots of things have been rearranged and cancelled and postponed. The U23s usually is just before the Olympics, so it's Olympics qualifiers, but that was obviously delayed because the Olympics was delayed. So the U23s haven't got anything at the moment, not at our level anyway. The U15s and actually the U20s are supposed to have something later in the year this year. So last year we also ran a U20s because we had a U20s competition. So that kind of changes depending on what competitions are coming up. Now, potentially there'll be something in November. So again, we'll after this process of games, we'll look at introducing those U20 players that we have into that group, and the U17s that are strong enough. And Claudio, the other coach, will lead that U20s group into games in November if they go ahead. The U15s, I think, is in the summer, but realistically, is that going to go ahead? I'm not too sure that children travelling at this time will be possible. So the seniors should go ahead, but whether anything else does this year, we'll wait and see. And if it does, we'll be prepared. But if not, then we recognise that's the times we live in.
No, definitely. Well, I'm going to go to the last question for the guests. We've got 3 in this time. Said if you could do things differently in your career, what would they be and why? I'm not too sure you could do too much.
Yeah, I agree. I think though I've had to work hard, I think things have fallen in place quite well, and I'm happy with the career progression. I think that in terms of changes and regrets, I think when you lose games, of course, you think about things in a lot of detail, and I guess you use them as a learning experience. So I wouldn't say necessarily regrets, but I think they're good learning experiences. And I think that it's difficult in football because you never know what your pathway will look like. I think it's impossible to plan that I'm going to do this and this and this and this because everything depends on opportunity. But I'm pleased with how things have gone, and hopefully it will my career will continue to progress and accelerate, and hopefully in the future I'll be happy with wherever I am. I'm always, I think you have to take risks. I took a risk to come here, and it certainly paid off. And it's like I said, football is you have to live in the moment. You have to enjoy the journey. I don't think you can look too much at the end goal because, as I said, you don't know what that will be. So just enjoy the journey and don't get caught up on those bad moments and those bad results, because that's football, that happens. And as long as you learn and you move on and you work hard, then good things can certainly happen.
Well, no, definitely, I agree. Just one for you personally. What is and it's just a question that I ask most people if we're international sort of guests. What's one thing that you would bring over, or what you miss, from being at home, from being in
Sure.
obviously thousands of miles away?
Yeah, I think you miss a few things. I think naturally you miss people. I think obviously all my family are at home and friends. So though we're lucky to live in a day and age where you can pick up the phone and you can see people, at any given moment. I think you of course miss people, and prior to COVID, my family loved coming out here for a little bit of Caribbean sun.
Yeah, I bet, yeah.
Hopefully that'll happen again at some point. So you miss people, and it might sound a little bit strange, but sometimes I actually miss the cold weather. The reason I say that is it's 30 degrees here, which sounds great, but when it's every day for 2.5 years, you kind of you look forward to those overcast days. So sometimes I miss the weather a little bit, but it's other than that, just family, really, family and friends, and probably the biggest thing other than that would be going and watching football matches. Of course, I watch games here, but I would watch. Fortunate that I'd watch Ipswich as much as possible, and with my friends, and we'd go down to London and watch games, Premier League games as much as possible. Fortunate that we go to Arsenal and Tottenham regularly, so I miss games like that. I miss the level of football there, but at the same time, I recognise that I've got experiences here that I never would have back home. So it's it works both ways.
Yeah. So do you have access? Do you have access to all the Premier League games, or any football that you want, similar to over in England?
Yeah, I'd actually say in a sense we probably have a little bit more access, because they tend to show more games on different channels, whereas maybe Sky or BT only show one, selected games. So still get games as normal. It's there's plenty of places to watch here, whether you want to watch it at home, whether you want to go to a pub or a bar. It's football, and the times work better as well. So like Champions League games, for example, are during the day, like 2:00 when I'm not coaching. So it means I actually probably watch more football here than I would have done back at home, because we'd be coaching or have games at a similar time. So for that it works quite nicely.
Perfect. I'm going to do the last question for you, and then we'll wrap it up. The last question I'd like to is a bit of advice, really, from like a proposed or potential coach who's looking to do the next step. What kind of advice would you give? I know you said hard work, because you put a lot of hard work into volunteering, and when you're in your early years. So what would your advice be to somebody who's really looking to get their teeth into a role, or trying to get into their foot in the door?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think there's a few bits. I think you touched on it there, and as I said, hard work for me is the biggest one. You have to be willing to be the hardest worker in the room, especially if you come from not having that playing background, or that extensive playing background. I think you have to do something to be recognised, and other than that, of course, you have to be willing to learn and apply yourself as much as possible, because you can't just be hardworking and not be any good. So you have to, as well as being, as I said, the hardest worker, you have to know your stuff. You have to learn. You have to be willing to speak to people. I had some really good mentors, players that have played at a high level, players that have coached for many years, and I just tried to pick up as much information as I could. And the final thing I think would be sacrifice, as I said. So especially in the early years, I recognized that I had to sacrifice my free time. I had to sacrifice, I might arrange to go for dinner with somebody, and then all of a sudden Ipswich asked me to coach, and I had to sacrifice and say, sorry, I can't come for dinner now, because I knew that if they didn't ask, if I said no, they asked the next person, and then when another opportunity comes around, they ask them again rather than ask me. So I think they're the biggest things. I think you have to know your stuff. I think you have to work really hard, and I think you have to sacrifice, sacrifice in the short term to get to where you want to be in the long term. And they're the biggest three things I think you have to do. Volunteering, I think, is key. I think we all think we shouldn't do something for free, but ultimately, if we want to be recognized and we want to get somewhere, we have to give our time and show that we're good enough and that we're committed enough. And as I said, I did that for many years, but thankfully it's paid off, and I'm now in a job that I'm very happy with, and gives me a good challenge. And I think if I hadn't have volunteered, my pathway would have not been the same as it has been now.
That's brilliant. That's great advice, from somebody who's gone from, an academy level club in England through to, the national team, so that's brilliant. I appreciate all the time you've spent with us, Ben, and your insight into your journey. And, I wish you all the success for the coming fixtures when they come about. And obviously, Sports Coffee will keep an eye on how you get on, and please keep in touch and keep retweeting us, so we can we'll get together again and have a chat and see how you've gone after you qualify. So again, Ben, appreciate your time. Great to get in touch with you. So this will be put onto our YouTube channel, Sport Coffee. It will be released on the 6th of March, so in a couple of weeks' time. So make sure everybody, make sure you have a re-listen if you haven't watched it all. Make sure you listen to all of it. It's really good insight from Ben. So Ben, again, thank you for your time. All the best for the future. And that has been your episode for today.
Thanks so much thanks for having me on. It's been really good to talk football, and I think what you're doing here with Sports Coffee is great. And again, I wish you every success with it. So we'll definitely keep in touch, and all the best to yourself as well.
Thanks very much, Ben. Thank you.
Thanks.